Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
In the previous module, I introduced the concept of green and blue water based on the different water flows in a particular catchment area. Now, based on that foundation, in this module, I will introduce the concept of green and blue water footprint. This is the summary of the previous module where we looked at what happens to precipitation happening in a particular catchment area. Some of that water is absorbed in soil and stays on the vegetation. Part of it runs off at field level and contributes to surface and groundwater. And still whatever water is left will run off from the catchment area out of the catchment to a different catchment. And we said that water that is part of soil and vegetation is green water, and water that is part of the surface and groundwater is known as blue water. Now let's build on this and understand the concept of green and blue water footprint. In order to understand that, we need to understand what happens to water that is stored in soil and vegetation as well as surface and groundwater. Before we do that, we need to briefly understand the concept of evapotranspiration. So this concept is related to growth of any plant or tree. So evapotranspiration is a combination of two terms, transpiration and evaporation. Transpiration represents water that is given out from the leaves. So the root system of a particular tree or plant will absorb water from the ground, and the water will travel up through the capillaries and will come to the leaves, and some of that water is given out by the leaves. So this is known as transpiration. Similarly, there is some water that is evaporated from the soil as well as some of the capillaries. So when a plant grows, it uses water in the form of transpiration as well as evaporation. So evapotranspiration is a combination of these two terms. Any plant, tree or grass that is growing will have certain evapotranspiration rates. So based on this idea, let us now try to understand what happens to the water that we identified as green and blue water. So I will go to this figure, which is similar to the one that I had drawn previously, which represents soil and vegetation as well as surface and groundwater. So let us focus on the soil and groundwater component. Let us try to understand what happens to this particular water. So this water, some of the water that is stored in this soil will be used for what is known as non-production related evapotranspiration. So let us first draw that. So some of this water in the green water compartment will be used for non-productive evapotranspiration. So this essentially means water that is used for growing things that we don't really need. So this could mean weeds, grasses that are not intended to grow or that are not consumed eventually by us for some productive use. But a significant portion of this water could actually be used for production related evapotranspiration. So let us draw that. So some of this water will be used for production related evapotranspiration. Some of this water will also become part of the product that is being grown. So for example, any grain that we grow or any fruit or vegetable that we grow in agriculture, it inherently contains some water. Most of the water is actually used for the growth and therefore consumed, but some water actually becomes part of the product. Watermelon, for example, is majoritarily consisting of water. So some water will actually become part of the product. So that also is taken up from the same source, that is the green water. So I can call it as water contained in product or embedded in product. Okay. Now that is as far as that is what happens to the green water, that is part of the soil and vegetation. Now let us try to understand what happens to the water that is part of surface or groundwater. Now if you talk about agriculture, for example, when we do irrigation, we actually dig up we dig up wells. In most cases we dig up wells and take out water from underground aquifers. So that is part of the groundwater. Now some of that water, if it is used for irrigation, it will again be part of the what is known as production related evapotranspiration. So we can again, even for the surface or groundwater, and you can do irrigation from surface water as well, like canals and rivers. So from this common pool, I will again take out some water. Some water will be used for production related evapotranspiration. And just like the green water, if water is being used for irrigation, it will be used for evapotranspiration, but some water will also become part of the product. So again, some water will be considered as water contained in the product. But additionally, if you are using surface and groundwater, this water is also used for various other applications. When it comes to green water, which is stored in soils or on vegetation surface, you can only use it for growing plants and therefore primarily for agriculture. But we use surface and groundwater for many other things. And this is the water that is taken out. Let's say we are using water for industry, let's say for a boiler application or for washing something or purifying something. We take out water and remove it and use it for something else, and it typically it goes to another catchment area. Basically it's coming out of that catchment, and the source for that water is also surface and groundwater. So we can draw that particular stream as well, and I will call that as water transfer to other catchment. So this term, water transfer to other catchment, is a very broad term. It includes all kinds of applications of water other than agriculture. So it includes water used for industry, it includes water used for power generation, it includes water used for municipal use as well. So this is a very generic term. It basically represents water that is not used for crop growth. Now some of the surface water that you are using, and if you use it for irrigation on a particular farm, some of that water will again be used for non-productive use. So I can again draw a line similar to the one that I have drawn for green water, and it becomes a part of the non-productive evapotranspiration. Similarly, some of the water that is taken up from the surface or groundwater can be recycled immediately for whatever reasons. So there could be a connection or there could be water flows that don't go out of the catchment area, they stay within the catchment area. So this is known as the return flow. So this figure summarizes what happens to the green and blue water that we had seen in the previous module. So to summarize, green water can be used for non-productive evapotranspiration. It can also be used for productive or production related evapotranspiration, mainly for agriculture and forestry. Similarly, surface water can also be used for production related evapotranspiration as well as water contained in the product, while water can also be taken out and used for some other application. Now, based on this, we can now understand the concept of green and blue water. So this is the same figure which is taken from the water footprint manual. It shows the same flows and same different uses that we had identified in a more organized manner. So based on this, the definition of green water footprint is that it's the volume of rainwater consumed during the production process. The total rainwater evapotranspiration from fields and plantations plus the water incorporated into the harvested crop or wood. So green water footprint in simple terms means the utilization of green water for productive use. The definition of blue water footprint is consumptive use of the runoff flow. In other words, the abstraction of runoff from the catchment insofar as it does not return to the catchment in the form of return flow. So in simplified terms, this definition is somewhat complicated and wordy, but in simple terms, blue water footprint is the amount of water that is consumed or taken from the surface and groundwater sources. And further, it includes water that does not return to the same catchment area. So there is no return flow. Whatever is the water is taken out from that catchment area, only that water is considered as part of blue water footprint. And that water can again be for productive and for productive evapotranspiration if it is used for agriculture, or it could include water that is going out of the catchment area if it is used for industry or municipal purpose. So this is on the same figure. This picture shows the green and blue water footprint. So just to show here, the green water footprint is the production related evapotranspiration and water content in product that is coming out from the soil and vegetation compartment, while blue water footprint includes the other things that I have already explained. So green water is mainly relevant for agriculture and forestry. So if you are doing water footprint calculation for something that involves agriculture, let's say the feedstock is agriculture related, then green water footprint is very important because a lot of agriculture depends on utilization of green water, and therefore green water footprint will become important. Blue water footprint, on the other hand, although it includes evapotranspiration, if you are doing irrigation, it also includes water that is used for several other applications. And there is a caveat when it comes to calculation of blue water footprint. Water is considered as part of blue water footprint only if it does not return to the same catchment area. So even if you are using water from a particular catchment area and you are returning the water to a different catchment area, let's say you are transporting water as part of something and it is being discharged in another catchment area. If that is the case, then it is considered as part of water footprint. Secondly, also if the water does not return to the catchment area in the same period, then also it is considered a part of the blue water footprint. So the important learning outcomes of this module are green water footprint includes green water used. It is mainly relevant for agriculture and forestry. Blue water footprint includes water that is used from surface and groundwater compartments. And there is a concept of time of return to the catchment area which needs to be considered when you are calculating blue water footprint. In this module, we will focus on the third component of water footprint, which is known as the gray water footprint. So these are the definitions of green and blue water footprint. Green water footprint includes the volume of rainwater consumed during the production process, and blue water indicates the consumptive use of runoff flow, or in other words, water removed from ground or surface water sources. When the method for water footprint was initially proposed, the method only included the calculation of green and blue water footprint. But subsequently it was realized that several products also lead to water pollution. And the idea came as to, can we actually include the water pollution aspect also in water footprint? And that's how the concept of grey water footprint was introduced to the water footprint assessment method. Conceptually, the grey water footprint is different from green and blue water footprint. I mean, we will see that in the subsequent part of this video. Let us look at the definition of grey water footprint. So, conceptually, grey water footprint is an indicator of the degree of freshwater pollution associated with a process step or the production of a particular product. So as I mentioned previously, the idea is to capture the freshwater pollution that is happening because of a particular product. And the formal definition of grey water footprint is the volume of fresh water that is required to assimilate the load of a pollutant or pollutants based on natural background concentrations and existing ambient water quality standard. Let us look at the definition in more detail by taking an example and in terms of the equation that is used to calculate the grey water footprint. So let us say L is the total pollutant load being discharged to the water body, and this is expressed in terms of mass per unit time. So this could be kg of pollutants per hour or kg of pollutants per day that is being discharged to the freshwater body. C max is the ambient water quality standard for the pollutant, or in other words, this is the maximum concentration that the pollutant can have in a water body. This could also be treated as the regulatory standard which is set by the government. And this is typically in terms of concentration, so the unit is mass per unit volume. Additionally, the grey water footprint also considers the natural concentration of that particular pollutant in the receiving body, and that is represented as Cnat. And this natural concentration is the concentration that the body or the freshwater body will have without any human intervention. This is again expressed in terms of mass per unit volume. So this could be typically mg per liter or microgram per liter and so on. So given these three numbers, the grey water footprint is defined as the ratio of L and C max minus C nat. So this is indicated in the slide. And the final unit of grey water footprint is volume per unit time. So this could be meter cube per year, meter cube per month, and so on. So let us look at this definition a little bit further by taking a very simple example. And through that I will also clarify certain additional points related to grey water footprint calculation. So let us take this example problem. Let us say that the particular pollutant that we are concerned about is nitrogen, and the total nitrogen load coming out from a particular unit is 0.02 tons per year. So this is the amount of nitrogen that is being discharged to the freshwater body. It could be lake, it could be river, and so on. And that quantity is 0.02 tons per year. Let us assume that the maximum acceptable concentration of nitrogen in the water body is 10 milligrams per liter. So you cannot have a concentration more than 10 mg per liter. And to begin with, let us assume that the natural concentration is 0. So that means by default, without any human intervention, there is no nitrogen content in the water body. So now, given these numbers, let us try to calculate the water footprint. So as I have already said, L is 0.02 tons per year. C max is 10 mg per liter, and C nat, which is the natural concentration, is 0 mg per liter. Now, given this information, the water footprint is calculated as 0.02 tons per year divided by 10 minus 0 mg per liter, which also is equal to 0.02 tons per year divided by 10 into 10 raised to minus 6 tons per meter cube. So I have done unit adjustment. Based on this, the water footprint comes out to be 0.02, sorry, it's 0.002 into 10 raised to power 6 meter cube per year. So this is our gray water footprint. It's 0.002 into 10 raised to 6 meter cube per year. The interpretation of this is, if you are discharging 0.02 tons per year of nitrogen in the water body, and if the maximum allowable load or maximum allowable concentration of nitrogen in the water body is 10 mg per liter, and if the natural concentration is 0 mg per liter, then you will need 0.002 into 10 raised to 6 meter cube per year of water to reach this particular concentration, which is the maximum allowed concentration. Now let us see what happens if your natural concentration increases. So let's keep the other numbers as same. So L remains as 0.02 tons per year. Cmax is again taken as 10 mg per liter. Now I have said that the natural concentration has changed from 0 mg per liter to 2 mg per liter. That means naturally the water body has 2 mg per liter. Now if you do this adjustment, and if calculation procedure will be the same, so water footprint gray would be 0.02 divided by 10 minus 2 in the corresponding units of tons per year and mg per liter. And if you do the unit adjustments and complete the calculation, the water footprint comes out to be 0.0025 into 10 raised to 6 meter cube per year. So this number that we have calculated now is actually higher than the previous number. The previous number was 0.002. The next number, with the consideration of 2 mg per liter as the natural background concentration, the water footprint is higher. This can actually be a little counterintuitive, because the immediate thinking is that if the natural water body has 2 mg per liter, then in order to achieve a particular concentration, we should require less water. So this becomes a little bit counterintuitive. So let me explain this with the help of an additional point. So the way the concept behind gray water footprint is to find out how much water is required given a particular freshwater body to achieve a particular concentration. So let us look at two examples. One is when you have a particular water body. Now your total load to the water body is going to be the same, which is L. In this particular example, it was 0.02 tons per year. And you have fresh water, which is coming in with some natural concentration of the pollutant. In the first example we saw, it was 0 mg per liter. So there was no natural concentration. But the final concentration, maximum allowed concentration, is fixed at 10 mg per liter. Now let us look at a similar situation. Again the same water body. The load is again the same. Now in this case the natural concentration has changed from 0 to 2 mg per liter. The Cmax is still the same, which is 10 mg per liter. So if you compare these two scenarios, we identify or we realize that the starting concentration or the starting load is the same. So you are still discharging the same quantity of nitrogen or pollutant into the water body. In the first case, the natural water concentration is 0. In the second case, the water already has some nitrogen, but the final concentration that you need to reach is also the same, which is 10 mg per liter. Which means in order to take care of the total nitrogen that is discharged 0.02 tons on an annual basis, you will require lesser quantity of this water because naturally there is no nitrogen in the water. In the second case, you still have to take care of the same quantity of nitrogen, but the water that is coming in now already has some nitrogen, and therefore in order to reach this particular maximum allowed concentration, you will actually require more water. And that is what we found. In this case, in the first case, the water footprint was 0.002 into 10 raised to power 6. In the second case, it was 0.0025 into 10 raised to power 6. So this quantity in the second case was more because the natural content of nitrogen itself was higher. So you require more water for dilution. So that is an explanation of why the result can seem a little counterintuitive. To just elaborate further, grey water footprint is based on the assimilative capacity of freshwater body to take care of the pollutant, and it therefore quantifies how much of this particular fresh water is needed to ensure that maximum levels are not crossed. So if the freshwater body already has some background load of that particular pollutant, then you need more water to reach the required concentration. I would also like to identify certain caveats related to grey water footprint. So when we compare it with green and blue water footprint, the green and blue water footprints actually tell you the water that is required for production of a particular product. Grey water footprint, on the other hand, is just an indicator of how much water is needed to take care of the pollution. It doesn't mean that in the actual production process that much water is really consumed, because some industries actually may not be following the regulations. So grey water footprint is more conceptual in that sense. The actual water used by a particular industry to take care of pollutant could be less. Non-zero grey water footprint does not automatically mean that the water quality standards are violated, as we have seen in the example. You can reach the water quality standard by adding more water. The third important point is grey water footprint is going to be location dependent, because the natural concentration of the pollutant is going to be different. So if you are discharging pollutant into a lake versus a river in two different geographical regions, you may require lesser or more quantities of water. So your grey water footprint will change. And the requirement is that the grey water footprint should be less than or equal to the existing flow of water. So whatever water footprint that you get, if that number is less than, let's say, the flow of a river, and you are discharging the pollutant into a river, as long as the river flow rate throughout the year is more than that the grey water footprint, then it is acceptable. So the important learning outcomes of this module are: we learned the concept of grey water footprint. As I said, it captures the freshwater pollution because of production or an individual. It quantifies the quantity of ambient water needed to assimilate a given pollutant load. And the requirement is that the grey water footprint should be less than the natural water flow.